Hi YouTube, welcome to Pagan Perspective. This is Megan, aka Sabiristry. Today we are talking about coping strategies. So the question this week is all about kind of how we're dealing with this time with COVID and all of that. Excuse my puppy. And what are our coping strategies for that, as well as like what are potential pagan ways, spiritual ways, religious ways, however you want to put it, that we deal with times of stress, and in particular what's going on right now. So coping strategies is something that I do just on the daily. It's part of my work. And as I've mentioned on this channel before, I am a therapist. So using coping skills and teaching coping skills is sort of my bread and butter. However, that's not something that I think I want to get into for this particular video, mostly because coping strategies are, while there are some universal ones that are good in general for most people, or that most people could find some benefit from in some way, they are pretty standard, and you've probably heard of them before, taking a deep breath, things like that. Now, other coping skills, of course, are very subjective, and they're very attuned to the person and the particular situation that they're going through. So when I have a client that I'm working with who has a particular issue, we call it their presenting problem. So most people don't come to therapy unless there's something that isn't right for them. They're usually coming to fix something, to change something. So that presenting problem that we talk about is usually what we focus on for what the coping skill needs to be. So the coping skill is going to look very different if they are dealing with anxiety versus, say, depression. And so that's something that needs to be very personalized. And it's not just for what the client is dealing with or what you are dealing with. It's also that person's personality, because one coping skill is not going to work the same for every person. There's going to be general things, like I said, taking a deep breath, probably the majority, I would say, of human beings, if they're feeling a little stressed and they take a deep breath, that can provide a very tiny amount of relief. Again, that's probably the major percentage of human beings, but it's not everybody. And again, it's such a small amount that it could really, truly help. Some people it might help more than others. But coping skills that are personalized and that are tailor-made to the person are going to have a much bigger impact. We also have coping skills that are healthy and unhealthy. So we have a word in the therapeutic world called maladaptive, and adaptive on the other side. So mal is this kind of prefix that means bad, right? And so something is maladaptive when it no longer serves or it does detriment to the person. So if you have a coping skill, which a lot of times our coping skills when we're very young are not something we consciously do. They're more like, you've probably heard the term defense mechanism, right? A coping skill, like a early defense mechanism, is something that we develop to get us through something that's very difficult, a trauma or what have you. And those coping skills aren't always the healthiest sometimes. Sometimes they're great. Other times they're not. And sometimes they start off serving us really, really well. And then as time goes on, because circumstances change and things, then they become maladaptive. They change from adaptive, really helping us through the situation, to maladaptive, to now they're causing a problem. So that's just something to think about, is that we always should be looking at our coping skills and making sure that our coping skills are still serving the purpose that they're supposed to be serving. Are they actually helping us, or are they making it worse? For example, Some people have a coping skill of having a drink after work, right? And that calming effect that having a drink after work that gives them, it can be great, right? It can be very adaptive, no problem. Even there's been plenty of studies that even show that, certain amounts of red wine can actually have some good health benefits, some antioxidants and such. So it can be adaptive. However, as we all know, drinking can also become maladaptive. And we can cross that line for taking a coping skill that was working and was serving us, and it can morph into something that no longer serves us healthfully, right? And so that's when somebody might seek out help in order to help with that problem, right? And it's just a coping skill that sort of went awry. And that's a really important thing to remember, is that sometimes when we have something that might seem like a detriment to us, right? We think that we've done something wrong, and we haven't. And those coping skills, it's not that they're necessarily bad or we're always bad. It's just they're maladaptive. They're just not serving us right now. They're just not helping us to cope more than they're hurting us, right? Because it's all about balance. The coping skill, the whole point of a coping skill is it's supposed to help you cope. Well, the coping skill should help us cope more than it takes away from us. So this is also important to remember when we're talking about coping skills, because we want to make sure that whatever we do doesn't use up more energy than we have available, right? So if we're trying to use a coping skill to help us with, say, fatigue or depression or something like that, and then we go and use a coping skill that actually takes more energy out of us than we even have, then did it really help us cope? No. So that's something to keep in mind, is that one coping skill, while it might work for somebody else, might not work for you because your situation might be different. So we have to always think about the individual in that case. And just because somebody wrote about it on a blog somewhere or said, this is a great coping skill, go color in a coloring book, that's a good example that I like to use as a personal example. So I get told a lot from different therapists, that they tell people to write in a journal or color all the time. And personally, I know for me, I don't tend to say that to somebody unless I know my client well enough to know that that's something that they can do easily for them. So for me personally, I have carpal tunnel. And so if I sat and I colored for hours at a time, or wrote in a journal for hours at a time, I would be in so much pain in my hands that then I would have an additional problem. I'd have to cope with additional level of an issue, essentially. And so that's a really good example, whereas coloring in a coloring book and writing in a journal are amazing coping skills for a lot of people. It's just not everybody is going to benefit from that. And it doesn't mean it's not a good coping skill. It just means it's not for that person, if that makes sense. So that being said, things that I like to do on the spiritual side, which is why I'm not going to essentially get into a ton of therapeutic coping skills, because everyone is different and you can look up a million of them. The most important thing is make sure that you're analyzing them to make sure that they work. They're going to work for you and going to serve you, and the balance is going to be correct. They're going to help you more than they hurt you. So spiritually, if I'm thinking about coping skills that I like to do, prayer is something that I use quite a bit. And so I very much am religious in that sense. I did a whole video on kind of my wanting to, I reclaim the word religious. And for me, it's really important to kind of have that as part of my path. And so prayer is one of those things. And I do that just privately. And it just, that is something that I really enjoy, is just having that time to be able to have that communication with the goddess, and it's important to me. I think that some people might call it meditation. They find that same coping skill, if you will. They find that same feeling of calmness and relief through meditation. I like to call it prayer for me, because I want to focus on my relationship with the goddess during that time, and my kind of communion with her and the energies. So that's something that's important to me. I think that one of the things that we have to remember is everybody's experience when it comes to their spirituality is going to be a little bit different. And so what might be comforting to me might seem really foreign to you. So for me, that's the biggest coping skill I can say. The other is using distraction. And that has been really important in this time, this COVID time, is just finding that mix of having enough distraction that I'm not constantly thinking about everything that's happening, but not so much distraction that I'm using up all the spoons that I have. So if you're unfamiliar with spoon theory, in a nutshell, spoon theory is something used in the mental health community, in particular chronic illness. It's all about when you wake up in the morning, you have so much energy, and in terms of spoons, and everything that you do costs you that energy, costs you those spoons, and you only have so many a day to give out. And so if I have a coping skill, something that or a distraction that I am trying to do to help me not think about what's going on, if that uses up all of my energy, all my spoons for the day, then did it really serve me? Again, it's a balance, right? And so I need to make sure that I'm being judicious. I am being frugal with my energy. And one way you can also think about it, if spoons aren't for you, you can also think about it as you wake up every morning with a certain amount of money in your bank account. And that's the money you have for the day, no more, and that's it. And so everything that you do costs money. Taking a shower costs money, right? Making dinner costs money. Whatever it might be, it's all going to cost some of that emotional and energetic money, right? And so when you're out of money, well, you're out. It's like at that point, you don't have anything you're spent. And so I need to try and do things that are a little more frugal, right? I need to make sure that the things that I'm doing, I'm spending, only the energy that I have for the day. And I'm not kind of going into debt, energy debt. So it's not rolling over into every day. I mean, have you ever felt that way where you do something so much, you just put forth so much energy one day that the next day you are just beat. And it's like you literally went into emotional and energetic debt for the next day, and you're a wreck. And I know some days like that, I just end up sleeping the whole day because I overspent my energy on the day before. So it's just something to keep in mind, and just be frugal with your energy. If you're going to look up coping skills online, try to make sure that you are looking at reputable places. Make sure that they're, foundations, look at what's behind them. Are they standalone or are they funded by something? A little due diligence. Make sure that they're not, being funded by someone who might have an interest in making you think a certain way. And then also, make sure that whatever the skill is, it's something that feels right to you, that isn't going to make you feel judged or shamed, or that is just not working for you. And then the next, on the spiritual side, find a way to have quiet moments in your path. If that is just grounding yourself and feeling nature, or if that is meditation, or in my case, prayer. all of those things can bring about a calmness and can help cope with things. And it needs to be specific to you and to what you feel like will work well in your path and for your life. And then the biggest thing is to just try not to go into debt if you can, energetic debt, and be as frugal as you can with your energy, so that you have it for when you want to spend it on the important things, the things that you really want to make sure that you put lots of energy into. All right, I think that's it for today, everyone. I hope that you're having a wonderful rest of your week. As always, blessed be and aloha. Bye.